Hey there, I'm Nick True, and since 2015, I've helped over 1,000 individuals set up and run their budgets using a software tool called You Need a Budget, or YNAB for short. And like we shared in the last lesson, I've helped Adam and Diane since 2020, and now we're excited to roll this out to all of their clients just like you. And in this lesson, I want to walk you step by step to set up YNAB for your unique situation. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you two quick things. The first is I want to encourage you to make sure that you're on a computer. A desktop or a laptop will work fine, but I would encourage you not to set this up on a phone or tablet. While I do use my phone all the time for day-to-day management of YNAB and using it to guide my decisions, I wouldn't do the setup process on a phone or tablet. There's just too much going on. So if you're currently not at a computer, I would pause this video and come back at another time and do the setup with me then. And that brings me to the second point. I want you to be patient with yourself. YNAB is an incredible tool, and it's going to help you get a really good handle on your cash flow and help you make sure that you're on track towards doing the things that matter the most to you. But it does have a learning curve. And so I would really encourage you to be very liberal with your use of the pause button, okay? Have your YNAB set up on the desktop and then watch the video and kind of as I do something, pause me, come over to YNAB, do that step, and then come back to the video and go to the next one and go back and forth until you get through it. This will take some time, but I promise once you get on the other side of it, you're going to have your budget set up and be super dialed in, and then your day-to-day management of the tool will be way less. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. Now, I'm going to go to youneedabudget.com or ynab.com, and I'm going to set up a brand new free trial. Now, at this point, you may already have a link. If you don't, you should reach out to info@forefront.com, and you may have already signed up. I'm going to set up a new one so that I can show you what it looks like once we get in here. If you're like me and you've just now signed up, you're going to be stuck inside the tutorial. I'm going to put my name here, and then it's going to start asking me a whole bunch of questions. And if you want to kind of follow through and, go through their tutorial, that's fine. I'm just going to basically click a bunch of buttons and get through here as fast as possible. I'm going to set up as little as possible. I'm actually not going to answer a lot of their questions. What they're doing right now is based on how I answer these, they would be creating a suggested category structure for me. But I have a suggested category structure for you that I would like for you to consider using, and I'm going to show you how I can even help you get it in here really quickly. And so we're going to basically just skip through all of this as quickly as possible, and then show me the plan. Great. And so now they're creating this for me. All right, at this point, I'll set a target. Again, we're going to do all of this later, so I'm just trying to get through this as quickly as possible. I'm going to click continue without targets in this case. If they did make me set one, I would just do it for like $1 and move on. Hit continue and then continue. And then I'm going to add a new account. That's the next step in order for me to unlock this tutorial. I'm going to put, test in here. I'm going to do 0 and then next and done. And now all of a sudden it will finally let me finish and I can skip, and then boom, it will unlock the program for me, and now I can, really get this going. And so if this is you, I'm going to now right click on this test account and delete it. And then on the budget screen in the top left, I'm going to right click on these and delete those as well. So that this way I have nothing in the budget, no account set up, a nice clean slate to work with. And now I can finally get started on my setup checklist. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to actually be done with this account, and I'm going to pop over to this one here, this Forefront new budget. And there should be a link down below this video if you haven't downloaded this already, but we actually have a Forefront YNAB cheat sheet. And in this cheat sheet, there's all kinds of good stuff you're going to want to see. The YNAB setup checklist, which we're going to be following in the remainder of this video, a targets decision tree, we'll talk about this later, some recommended routines, as well as a whole bunch of definitions, and down at the very bottom, a suggested category structure. We're going to get into all of this later on in this lesson, but first I'm going to focus on this YNAB setup checklist. These are the steps that we're going to be doing over the next little bit. You'll see the first step here is to create a new budget and give it a name. Now, we've already done that. I've already got a new one and I've got it really nice and clean and empty. But if you've tried YNAB in the past and you're sort of redoing it with this video, then you could come up here to the top left and click on the menu and then click New Budget and go ahead and give it a name, right? New Budget. And then when you click Create, it will create that for you and it'll look like this, although it will have some default categories that you can then delete. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and go to the next step. Now, you'll notice that the next 4 steps, step 2, 3, 4, and 5, are all related to setting up the bank accounts. That's where we're going to focus the majority of our time next. So I'm going to come over here, and on the left-hand side, you're going to notice it says Add Account. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And out of the gate, I need to immediately decide, do I want to do a linked or unlinked account? If you want to embrace manually entering your transactions, or your bank accounts will not link, or you're concerned about linking or anything like that, then you can certainly choose unlinked. But I would recommend for the vast majority of people to choose linked. This way that you can actually have YNAB talk to your bank and have it download the transactions as they come through. It'll make your life managing this so much easier, I promise. I'm going to go ahead and hit linked. Now, you'll notice I already have a whole bunch of accounts connected here. You're not going to have that. You're just going to see this Add Connection button. I will click that now. And as an example, I'm going to walk through linking my Capital One. Now, I don't actually use Capital One these days, so you're going to notice there's not really any money sitting in here. I'm going to do Continue as Guest, but I'll at least show you the linking process. So here I am, Capital One. It's going to open up a new window or new tab potentially. So it's going to open this up. And then I need to put in my username and password for Capital One. It's now going to want to verify, so it's going to text me a code. Let me check my phone here. All right, 020748. Submit. Now it's going to walk through here, hit continue. And then it's going to ask me if I'm comfortable letting YNAB read the banking information to be able to download those. I'm going to hit continue. And then sometimes you will have this option, sometimes you won't. It really just depends on the banking integration with Plaid, which is the tool that YNAB uses to do this. In this case, it's letting me choose if I want to connect all of my accounts to YNAB or if I just want to connect some specific ones. I would encourage you to go ahead and select all of them if you have this option. You don't have to put all of them in the budget, as we'll talk about in a minute, but you're just giving YNAB access so that we can choose which accounts we want to include later. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue and then authorize. All right, so now we have left Capital One and we're coming back to YNAB, and we're going to do this screen where it's going to ask us which accounts do we want to put in the particular budget. Now, right at this moment, based on our setup checklist, I just want you to add the checking account, okay? So for me, I'm actually going to deselect this credit card. We may add it back in a minute, but for now, I'm just going to do the checking account because I want to talk to you about it. So we're going to say checking. Now, I like to name this with the last 4 digits in the name, so I might put my last 4 here. This makes categorizing things like transfers easier later on. Now, if I wanted to choose a different account type, I could do that. But in this case, it is a checking. I'm going to leave it selected as checking and then hit next and done. Great. So now we've got our very first account in here. I can see it on the left-hand side with the name, and I see that there's a little bitty check mark here. That check mark lets me know that the connection between YNAB and that bank account is good to go. If I ever were to log in and see anything other than a check mark, I can hover over that and YNAB will tell me what's going on. Sometimes it's a key icon and I have to re-put in my username and password. Sometimes it's a wrench and YNAB's just got a bug and they're working on fixing it. But now I know at this point I'm good to go. Now let's come back over here real quick and talk about checking accounts versus savings accounts. It's important to recognize that YNAB is not supposed to track your entire financial life. It's certainly not at this point, okay? We don't need to put your investment accounts and your liabilities and loans. And we also don't really need to put any long-term savings in there, especially right now while you're learning the basics. That being said, if you do have more than one checking, you can go ahead and add those at this time. I'm just going to add the one checking in here as an example. But if you've got, maybe each spouse has a checking, or you have like a bills checking and a daily living checking, those are fine to go ahead and add both of those in there. But when it comes to savings accounts, I'm actually going to encourage you to probably not put in your savings account right now. The way that YNAB handles savings accounts is it's going to mix the money that's in a savings account with the rest of the money in your budget. And so, for example, if I had, let's say, let's put some more money in here. And if I go to the budget, you're going to notice I have $13,500. Well, if I were to add a savings account in here right now, and I choose this savings account type, and let's just put 20,000 in here just so we can really see it. All of a sudden, when I go to the budget, I'm now going to have $33,000. And if I'm not careful and really know what I'm doing, I might accidentally budget money that is physically in a savings account for something like buying groceries or paying my bills. And I might think that I've got money for those things, but really that money is in savings and I don't want to touch it. And so for beginners, I don't like to add these savings in here. Now, if you really want to keep an eye on your savings and you want to see it, that's fine. The key is that when you put this in here, so let's, do this. The key will then be when you get to this screen, you're going to want to choose Edit, scroll down and click Asset. And so then if I put $20,000 in here, all of a sudden, it's going to be in a whole new section called Tracking. And so I can keep an eye on it. I can see it, but it's not going to be mixed in with the budgeting money that we're going to use later in this lesson. So long story short, we're going to add all the checking accounts you use day in, day out. We're not going to add savings, or if you do, I would encourage you to set them up as an asset. Once you've got your checking accounts and maybe a savings account set up as an asset, of course, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is to set up your credit cards. Now, you're going to hear me hammer simplicity over and over and over again. And in the name of simplicity, I only want you to add credit cards that you are actively charging to. So if you've got some old credit cards, but you never really use them, don't add those in right now. If you have some credit cards that you are paying down, meaning you've got some debt and you're working on chipping away at it, but you aren't putting new charges on it, don't add those in either. Only add credit cards in that you are actively charging to day to day, week to week throughout your normal life. So let's pop back over here to our budget. We're going to click Add Account on the left-hand side, and I am going to choose Linked. Now, again, I've got a whole bunch of different accounts linked up here because I teach this stuff, but I'm going to scroll down to that Capital One connection. You'll notice it says 1 of 2. That tells me that I have 2 accounts linked to YNAB, but 1 account linked to this particular budget. Now, why do I say that? Well, as an aside, you can have as many budgets as you want. So like if you really like this and you ended up wanting to, run one for your business or your kid or anything else, you can do that. You can see here, I have tons of these budgets. I have this many because I teach from them and create different budgets, but I do have 3 or 4 real budgets. I track my in-laws budget in here. I have mine and my wife's budget. I have a business budget. I've got a real estate rental property budget. So I got a whole bunch of different budgets. You can do that as well. In this case, in this new budget, I have 1 account linked. I'm going to go ahead and link that second Capital One. So I'm going to click here. And now you'll notice the other account that's not in here is this Quicksilver card. I'm going to add that in now. Now, again, I like to rename these. So I like to go Quick Silver Credit Card. And then I like to put the last 4 digits. The account type is, of course, a credit card. You'll notice there's, all the different account types. In this case, I definitely want to leave it as credit card and then hit next and done. Now you'll notice I've got this new section. So I've got cash, which is my checking. I've got credit, which is the Quicksilver, and I've got savings. Now, perhaps I wanted to add in another credit card, right? I could do that. In this case, I'm going to do Unlinked just because I don't need to show linking again. And I'll do credit. And then let's say it's got a $4,500 balance. When you see a balance on a credit card, it will show up as negative red, which is normal, right? This is your total outstanding balance, not the statement balance, the total outstanding balance. So if you've got multiple credit cards, you can go ahead and pause the video right here, add those credit cards in, and then once you've done that, we'll be ready to move on to the next step. So step 5 is to set up a wallet account. Now, again, like savings, I'm actually going to recommend that most of you don't do this, okay? And so this is only if you would like to manually track cash-based spending. Most people these days don't spend that much money in cash, or if they do, they tend to get it out for highly specific reasons, like getting money out systematically to pay a lawnmower or a house cleaner or somebody like that. Most people don't tend to spend a significant amount of money in cash relative to their income. But if you do, for whatever reason, and you wanted to track it manually, you would click Add Account. It would be unlinked, of course, because you can't link YNAB to your wallet. And then you would call this My Wallet, and you would add a cash account. and then you would put in the current balance of however much money you currently have. And then as you, spend cash, you would need to manually come in here to YNAB and add the transactions to represent that cash-based spending. 99% of you don't do this, but I do like to include it as part of the setup checklist because there are some folks who this makes good sense for. Now, at this point, we've got all of your accounts set up, but we're not quite ready to go on to step number 6 yet. We've got one more thing we need to do. Let's pop back over here to the budget, and we need to check the starting balances on these bank accounts. Why is that important? Well, if I click in here to the checking, you'll see the starting balance here, March 27th, and it shows a starting amount of $13,430. The problem is that depending on your bank, sometimes YNAB's starting balance that it pulls will include pending charges. Said a different way, most banks call this the available balance because as charges start to process, when they're in a pending state, banks will go ahead and include them in the available balance. And then once they fully process or post, banks will call that your posted or cleared balance. Now, sometimes the problem is that YNAB, when it pulls things in, it will pull in the available balance that includes those pending charges. And then when those pending charges fully process, like probably tomorrow, all of a sudden I effectively have duplicates because my balance has already included those charges that just got pulled in again. And so what I need to do is I need to actually go and open a new tab and go log into my actual bank account and go look and see what was the ending daily balance on the day that I started YNAB and check that this number is actually correct. Once I've verified that it is, if it is, great. If it's not, I'm going to double click and I'm going to change this and actually it's, whatever else, and I'll change it and hit save. Once I've done that and I verified that the checking accounts and the credit cards, etc., are all matching, I can then hit this reconcile button and say yes and lock that in. Now, we're going to talk more about reconciling in some subsequent lessons, but you'll now notice on the right-hand side that this has now locked that transaction. That tells me that I have confidently verified that yes, this was the balance as of March 27th. So I'm going to do that with every single one of my accounts, check those starting balances, make sure that I don't have any mistakes out of the gate. From here, I want you to click over on the budget screen. So in the top left, you'll see there's budget, reflect, and all accounts. We're going to click on budget, and this is going to take us right over here to really the heart and soul of YNAB. This is where you're going to live most of the time as you're making decisions and using YNAB to help you decide what's important to you. Now, the first thing you're probably going to notice is this big green ready to assign number right up here at the top. And yours might look a little bit funny because like I said earlier, if you've got multiple checking accounts or you've got a savings account that is on your budget, YNAB is going to mix all of that money together and give you access to all of that money in your budget. In my case, because I only have the one checking account with a current balance of $13,000, YNAB's ready to assign perfectly matches that. Now, we're going to cover this more in depth in the next lesson, but we're going to use these dollars to actually assign them down to our categories here in a bit to help YNAB know what we want to do with our money. The idea here is if you've ever heard the concept of zero-based budgeting, the point is to look at all of the money that you have available and budget it down to zero. And in other words, we're giving every dollar a job. We're going to decide, all right, what do I want this $13,000 to do? Like I said, we're going to get to that in the next lesson, but I wanted to go ahead and give you a quick overview of it before we get into doing our category structure here. A lot of people get really thrown off with this idea of budgeting every single dollar because they're like, well, what if I don't want to spend all the money in my checking account? What if I want to what if I want to have some money in there that I don't touch? Then I'll often say, well, great. Let's add a new category here called Don't Touch This. And I'm going to add a category underneath this group called Bank Account Minimum. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put $1,000 in here, and I'm just going to let it sit there because I don't want to ever let my bank account drop below $1,000. Great. Now you'll see I have $12,000 left to do whatever I want to. Sometimes I'll have people and they're like, I don't even know what I want to do with this money. Then I'll say, great, let's create a category called I don't know yet. How much money do you not know about, right? And we can kind of play around with this idea here. Now, I'm going to delete this for now because we're not going to actually put those in as part of our category structure is concerned. But I wanted you to get a concept that we are going to give all of these dollars a job, even if that job is I don't know the job yet, or even if that job is, hey, just sit there, I don't want to spend you. That's totally fine. But we'll put a pin in this discussion for now. We're going to go on and look at the sixth step, which is to create and organize your categories and category groups. So what are those in YNAB? Well, we're about to add some groups in here. I want to show you on another one I've already set up that you're going to notice all these different category groups here. And we can add new category groups by clicking this little plus sign right here and saying new group. We can then hover over a group and add categories underneath it, right? This new category here. We can drag and drop these around. We can drag and drop the groups around and get them in different orders. We can right click and rename. We can use emojis. We can right click and rename this. So all of this stuff is highly customizable. That being said, to help you not be so overwhelmed by what in the world should you track, I do have some recommendations for you to follow. While there's a ton of different ways that you could set this up, if you come over to the cheat sheet and you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to notice that there are two overarching structural sort of recommendations that I have after looking at literally thousands of budgets at this point. The first is the simple category structure. You're going to notice that if you were to count these, there's going to be, less than 20 categories here, and we're just lumping things together. The second is the detailed category structure, and as you can see, it's very detailed. So largely, this is going to be dependent on how detail-oriented you are and what you're really hoping to use YNAB to pay attention to. My favorite question to ask people is, will you use this information to change behavior? Meaning, are we tracking something just for the sake of tracking it? If so, it's probably a waste of time. But if we're tracking something because you will plan to look at the reports or you want to pay attention to this on a day-to-day basis and use it to help make decisions, well, then it could be worth tracking. I've actually got these two budgets already broken out. Here's what the detail looks like. And you can see here, again, if I select all of them, there's a total of 51 categories in this. And you can see we have broken out things like bills. Every bill has their own dedicated line item. Well, we do actually lump together utilities and internet, but the rest of them are all broken out. Debt snowball, everything's broken out. Fund spending, Nick and Hannah fund spending's broken out. Monthly living's all broken out. The simple budget, on the other hand, only has 18 total categories. The groups at a high level are much simpler. They're just spending and savings. And you can see we've done things like lump together all of the bills, lump together all of the food, lump together all of the fun, lump together all of the shopping. So Amazon and clothing and cosmetics and everything shopping-wise goes together. So the question for you is going to be, how detail-oriented are you? What type of person are you? And I would really encourage you to choose the layout and option that is going to be the one that you will most likely stick to. For some of you, you are not going to use this if it is simple because it's not going to give you the information that you want, and so it will feel like a waste of time. For others of you, this detail thing is going to feel so overwhelming and so like, oh my gosh, it's just so much to track and deal with. I don't need to be that in the weeds, that this simple budget is going to be perfectly adequate for you and your goals. Either way, obviously, both of these options are just starting points, and you can come in here and you can add categories and mix and match categories as you see fit. So let's go back over to my brand new budget. You'll notice that there is a credit card payments group already in here. We're going to talk more about credit cards in a subsequent lesson, but this gets automatically created whenever you add credit card accounts into YNAB. Now, if I wanted to manually add these in, then what I could do is take a look at my little cheat sheet here and say, okay, well, I've got bills and debt snowball and fund spending. Let's just get the groups in here first. And I would actually add them in reverse order, like reimbursements, savings. So I would do this, reimbursements, savings, etc., etc. Now, in this case, I do want to show you, if you click below this video, there's actually a link that will take you to a template. So YNAB templates, and we actually have a dedicated template that you can use to copy and get at least close to this structure to go with. So if you look at the website, you'll see Nick True's starter template. If you click on this guy, come down here, click use this template in YNAB. It's then going to take you to your YNAB. Now, you may just have the one budget. In this case, I have a bunch, so I have to choose the correct one. I'm going to click this forefront new, and then it's going to bring up a new screen, and I can choose to select which ones of these I want to add in here. And you'll notice this looks eerily similar to the one that's in your cheat sheet, right? It's got a little bit different stuff, but it's very, very close. Either way, if you're wanting to go with the detailed level tracking, this will be a very quick way to get most of the structure in place, and then you can start to manipulate it from there. I'm going to go ahead and hit import categories, and then boom, now we've got it all in here, and check it out. I've got everything exactly according to the template, and it's even got all these cool little fun emojis in here. And from here, I can then right click and manipulate it and change around the titles of things. That being said, whether you're going to use that link to add all these in, or you're going to manually add them in yourself, at this point, I'm going to pop over to my detailed budget that I've already pre-built and talk you through some of the reasoning behind how we're tracking to get you to think about your specific category structure and some things that I might have that you don't, or vice versa. At this point, I would encourage you to kind of listen to me talk through some of these things while you are adding in your own categories and groups in here. I would encourage you to get the groups in place first. So, go ahead and get the groups in here if you're following the detailed, or the groups in here if you're following the simple. And then under each one, you can open it up and start to add in your own individual categories. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so we can talk about them. You'll see here for the bills group that I have added in basically individual categories for all of the different bills, with the exception of utilities and internet. Again, I'm trying to strike some sort of balance between being simple and detailed. I don't want to end up with hundreds of categories in here. And believe me, I've seen budgets with hundreds in here. It gets to become a nightmare to actually try and manage. And so something like utilities, I personally have never thought about moving simply because the water bill got too high, and I haven't seen any clients want to move because the water bill got too high either. And so most of the time, I'm not going to be making a decision based on just focusing on the water bill. And so for me, I'm just going to combine all of my utilities and internet together. That being said, you'll see how I kind of recommend breaking these out, but you could sort of combine or not some of your own. For example, if I wanted to, I could put Spotify and Netflix together. I could right click, rename this entertainment subscriptions, and then get rid of one of the other one. You get the idea. So that's the bills group. You need to think about your subscriptions, your utilities, your internet, your insurances, anything that is a bill with a fixed date. Now, I will say the way that I like to do bills is I think about these as weekly or monthly bills. If it's more further out than a month or more irregular, I'm going to actually put this down here in the irregular annual expenses. You'll see this section does include life insurance, which in this example, I'm using as a once a year premium for life insurance. And so because it's only once a year, I'm going to put it down here in the irregular annual section, not in the bill section. Now, the debt snowball I do keep separately. So if you're working on paying down some debt, obviously if you've just got one or two debts, like a car loan, you could put that up here in the bills group. But if you've got a debt snowball that you're actively working on chipping away at a number of debts, I do think it can be helpful to have a dedicated debt snowball group and then organizing them top to bottom based on your prioritization of paying those down. You'll also notice that I have a dedicated category here for credit card interest. You only need this if you pay credit card interest, meaning if you're carrying a little bit of debt right now, you're not paying them off in full, and you have that account in YNAB, you will need that category as well. Next, we're going to look at the fun spending group. Now, fun spending, obviously, this can vary wildly in different folks. You'll notice here that because I'm married, in the example I'm using, I like to actually have an individual fun spending category for each of us. This allows us to have money for our hobbies or interests without really having to ask the other person about it. My wife and I together have decided on a set amount each month that we both get to be able to just sort of blow and use however we see fit. And if I don't want to spend all of my money in one month, then great. That money will then just roll over to the next month and I can buy something bigger then. Now, we also put our eating out down here. Some people like to separate different types of eating out, like dining out versus fast food or takeout or bars or coffee. You can feel free to get as granular as you like. Entertainment, I tend to think of that as like concerts, movies, shows, that kind of thing. If you've got kids, you might also have a category just called family fun for when the entire family's going out for fun. ATM cash, I have this in the fund spending group in this example because I'm basically saying, hey, we sometimes get cash out as a petty cash and we use it to go out to eat with or buy ice cream with or those kinds of things. If you get cash out as more of a bill for like home services, then I would put your ATM category up in the bills group. And then home furnishings and decor. This is different than maintenance, right? Down here in the irregular section, we have home maintenance and repairs. In this section, this is furnishings and decor, right? Coming in here, you'll next see that we have a monthly living group. Now, you'll notice this is basically stuff that happens every month, but isn't really fun and also isn't a bill. And so you'll see things like groceries and householder in here, Amazon shopping. I like to have a dedicated category for Amazon shopping because it can be such a nightmare to try and break this out. Now, eventually, once you're comfortable with YNAB and you want to start breaking out your shopping at Amazon or Target, that's fine. But I would highly recommend at the beginning to have a dedicated category for things like Amazon, Target, or Costco, basically big box like this. Sometimes I even will put in the name big box, right? And I would just put all the transactions there. Next, we've got gas or transportation, workout equipment and clothing. You don't have to track this separately. My wife and I like to. Clothing essentials. The idea here is that for me and my wife, at least the way we do our clothing, is that the essentials, right? Socks, underwear, work clothes, we will budget for and plan for as a family. But if I just want new fun clothing, if I just want a new pair of shoes, then I take those from my Nick fun spending money. Again, that's how we do it. You don't have to do it that way. We've got a dedicated category for pet expenses. This is different than vet emergencies or vet bills. I will have a dedicated separate category often for vet emergencies or bills down here. I like to have almost like a dedicated emergency fund for pets and medical. And so this pet expenses is going to be food, grooming, toys, that kind of stuff. Now, haircuts. Depending on you and your spouse, if you're married and how you do things, you may want to have something broader like self-care, or you may want to have separation between sort of spouses, or you may want to separate things that are different types of self-care, right? Some people will have, dedicated categories for massages or acupuncture and keep that separate from like other medical type things. Again, feel free to kind of think about your life and how you spend money and the things that you would want to pay attention to. We have a giving category and then an unexpected junk drawer miscellaneous. I like to always have at least one of these because there's just always stuff that comes up that you don't really know where to put it. And so that's a good place for it. Now, this next group here, the kids group, I like to separate kids' expenses by kid if they're a little older. Now, if they're really young, you don't need to do this. But if they are older, or especially if they're adults and they have their own families and children of their own, you've got, grandkids that you're spending money on and buying stuff for. Sometimes it can be helpful to just say their family, right? But I like to separate kids on a per kid basis because especially as they age, they can be wildly different in terms of their expenses and activities. Some ideas here would be to have one category for each kid and their needs, right? Clothing, cosmetics, school stuff. And then if there's any expensive or dedicated categories that you might want to pay attention to for activities, piano lessons, you could do that. Sometimes parents will also have like a once a year summer camp. And so we might put a dedicated category in for that. Any larger one-off expenses you might want to do. I just have sort of an other kids discretionary category. Kids is definitely one of those areas where if you're not careful, you can end up with 20 categories here. So, less is definitely more, but you do want to try and capture as much as possible. Again, if you're using the simple structure though, that's fine. Just have one category for kids and you'll be good to go. And you put everything there related to the kids. Now, if your kids are older, they're in college, right? You might want to have some dedicated categories for college tuitions or whatever you're doing there as well. All right, this next section is irregular and annual. Now, you'll notice if you read these, a lot of these are things that people would traditionally call emergencies. I personally don't like traditional emergency funds. I would rather think about what are the different types of emergencies that can happen, and then let's just plan for those, right? The joke I often like to make is that if you have two twin 16-year-old sons that just got their driver's license, let's not be surprised, let's not be taken off guard when one of them backs into the mailbox and you have some auto maintenance to deal with, right? Both me and my brother totaled cars before we were 18, and so I don't think it is any big surprise when auto maintenance like that happens, right? And so we want to think about, how old is the home? What kind of vehicles do we drive? Do we have teenagers that are driving? How likely are some of these items? And then let's actually plan for some of these things so that they don't totally throw us off. That's really the big idea here. So you'll notice we've got auto maintenance and home maintenance, life insurance. We've got gifts like birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, baby showers. And then I do like to separate normal gift giving from holiday gift giving if that's something that you do. Now, one category I also do want to add in here would be medical expenses as well. And so again, the idea is this is going to be expenses that are going to the doctor. Some people will break out vision and dental. Again, you can get kind of crazy with how granular you get here. Be careful not to get too in the weeds, but I would definitely want to have something for medical as well. All right, now this next group is going to be savings. Now, obviously, again, feel free to rename or change these names to what you like. For me, when I think about savings, these are fun things that I'm saving up for. You'll notice, I could obviously have named this savings, right? I'm saving for home maintenance, saving for auto maintenance, but those aren't really fun to me. I like to think about saving for fun stuff. And so this is a small trip. Now, the reason I like to do this is, to me, if it's a long weekend, somewhere I'm driving to, something that doesn't cost a massive amount of money, just a small trip, long weekend, I like to just bundle those together. But if I've got a big trip, right, we're going to go to Europe for 2 weeks for the summer, or we're going to rent out a big cabin trip for the family, and I want to have a big sort of throwdown, I'm going to have a dedicated category for this. So I'm going to literally click here and add a brand new category for all of my big trips. That way I have them in the reports and it's really fun. I can then later look back and go, oh man, that was cool when we went there. How much money did that cost? We should do that again. And I can look back at it when I do this. In this case, I've got this big winter 2026 cabin trip as an example, but you can feel free to obviously click here and add in any large trips that in your mind you would want to track separately from like a small trips, long weekends. The other type of travel that I will track would be routine travel to visit family. And so if you have like, oh yeah, we always go, visit for the Thanksgiving or whatever, I'll have a dedicated category for that because I don't really like to mix visiting family in with like vacation travel. To me, they're very distinct in the types of expenses they are, and I want to track them separately for that reason. Now, you'll also see in this group, I've got like a kitchen renovation as an example, and see how that's different from savings tracking. Now, what's the difference here? Well, this really comes down to, where is this money? Okay, so with these types of things, small trips, Thanksgiving, kitchen renovations, etc., this is stuff that I'm saving for with money that is going to be on my budget. Whereas the savings tracking, I like to put that in the name here because that denotes to me, oh, this is stuff that I'm sending out to what YNAB would call the tracking section. This would be things that are not on budget, and typically this is going to be like investments, IRA contributions, 529 contributions, or emergency fund contributions. So you should add categories here that you're contributing to in terms of your investments that would be not prior to your paycheck. So anything that you're contributing to, that would be with money from your main checking account. Those are the categories that you would want to add here. Then, of course, the very last group that we have here is a reimbursements group. Not everybody will need these, but if you travel for work and you have to put it on your card and then they reimburse you, you'll want a pass-through category for that. Or if you do a lot of, Venmoing and buying for friends and then they reimburse you and this kind of thing, you may want to have a dedicated category for that as well. At this point, you might want to pause the video, go ahead and finish setting up your category groups and category structure. And once you've got it how you like it, we're going to go back over here and we're going to do step number 7, which is creating targets for all of your categories. Like I said in the intro video, managing your money should not be restrictive. If you've got this budget so dialed in, so tightly wound that you kind of hate spending money in the way that the budget encourages you to, then you're going to hate this process. You're not going to want to log in here. You're not going to want to use this thing, and you're going to go back to doing whatever it is you currently do. And the point is that we want you to actually use this to help you do more of the things that matter to you. And so we want to make a game plan for the things that you care about, and we want to set targets to tell YNAB what it is that we want to do. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. So let me explain a little bit about what a target is. A target is simply your game plan. It is telling YNAB what you want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the bills group, and we're going to start with your mortgage. It'll be super simple. And over on the far right hand side, yours will not look like this. Yours will look like this, so there's not going to be any yellow, and there's going to be nothing going on. And when I click on the mortgage, over on the right-hand side, you'll see this Create Target button. I'm going to click Create Target, and then you're going to notice a few different options here. So for every target, I need to first tell YNAB the cadence, so how often does this thing happen? I need to tell YNAB the amount of money that I need on that cadence. I need to tell them by what day of the month if there is a due date. And then I also need to tell it the behavior for if there's leftovers. So we'll talk about each of these, but most of your targets, just know, are going to be monthly. In this case, obviously, the mortgage is going to be set for monthly. So I'm going to choose monthly and then paste this number in. So this is my exact mortgage amount. Now, you can round up if you want to, but if you happen to know the exact to the penny amount for things like your bills, I would encourage you to put that in. Now, I know that the mortgage is going to be due on the first of the month. And then lastly, I have this option to set aside another or refill up to. When in doubt, choose set aside another. But let me tell you about how these work. This will make more sense in subsequent lessons, but the idea of a set aside another is that if there's leftover money in this target, so let's say that you get to the end of the month and you don't spend all of your grocery money. If there's leftover next month, do you want the leftovers to count towards the target? So do you want that leftovers to reduce the amount that you need because it's counting towards it? If you have $1,000 for groceries, but you only spend $950, next month that $50 that's left will count towards next month's $1,000, right? If you want that, you would want to do refill up to. YNAB will simply top off the gas tank. It will simply refill the target. Whereas if you're like, no, I want to always set aside this amount of money and I want to grow the money in there if there is any leftovers, something like clothing or auto maintenance or fun spending or travel, then you would want to use set aside another. The big thing though is that this is going to be the most conservative option. So if you're ever unsure, then I would choose set aside another and then hit save. Now you'll notice when I do this, YNAB will actually write the amount that is needed right here in the name, which is super cool. Now I want to point out that in the cheat sheet, if you scroll up, you'll notice that there's a YNAB targets decision tree. I'm not going to go over this in this video, but this is for you as a resource. If you are confused, then you can just walk through this decision tree and it will give you a really good sense of what type of target it should have. And so you can ask, okay, well, is this something I spend from every single month or is it a future thing? It's like, oh, well, it's every month. Great. I'll come down this direction. Do I need the leftovers to count towards next month, or am I fine to build it up? And I can follow this path, and then ultimately it will choose whether I do refill or set aside, and it will also help me choose whether I do monthly or custom or yearly. Let's go back and take a look at a few different other types of targets that we might use. So for something like pet insurance, you'll see if I click here, I've already got this target set up, but if I click edit, you'll see I've chosen monthly, 56, by the 6th, set aside another, and just like the mortgage, it's pretty straightforward and it happens every month on a certain date, and now YNAB adds that in here for me. So most of your bills are going to be pretty straightforward, but what about something like utilities and internet, where I've combined some bills together, or I have some variable bills in there like my electricity? Well, in this case, you'll see that I've chosen a $450 target and I've chosen refill up to. I kind of have two options with something that varies like this. One option is I can choose the highest amount that I ever think it will be. So maybe I look back at my electric and I go, the highest that my utilities have ever been is $450. And so I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to set it to refill up to. So basically every month, I'm just going to spend whatever it is. And then next month, I just have to top it back off to $450. Or what you can do, and this is actually what I prefer to do most of the time, is I'm going to set it to set aside another, and then I'm going to try and come up with a best guess average. So in this case, maybe I know that my internet is fixed at like $100 a month, and I know that maybe $350 a month is a good average for my utilities. So I'm going to leave it at $450, set aside another. The idea here is that during the low months, I will actually be starting to bank and save money so that during the high months, I can still budget my flat $450, even though technically the bill is going to be higher because I will have been saving throughout the low period that I'll be prepared for it. So that is some bills example. Let's come down here and take a look at something like fund spending. So you'll notice Nick and Hannah fund individual spending money. If I click edit here, I'm choosing an amount and I'm choosing it monthly. But in this case, I'm doing last day of the month because there's not really a fixed date, right? I could also do first of the month. Ultimately, it really doesn't matter all that much. But the key is I am choosing set aside another because if I don't spend all of my fund spending money, I do want that to roll over and build up month after month after month. Whereas something like eating out, I might look at it and go, just because we come in under budget, I don't need more money next month. So I'm fine to maybe change that one to be a refill up to. That's an area where I don't need to grow surplus if I came in under budget. Whereas again, something like entertainment, I would, right? We don't go to the exact same shows or concerts or movies every single month. Some months we do more, some months we do less. And so I'm trying to come up with a nice average over time. In fact, most of your monthly categories, you're going to be choosing averages. And so things like gas or Amazon shopping or groceries or pet expenses or clothing, most of these things, you're not doing a set amount every single month. And so right now you should just be putting in numbers based on what you think a good average is. And for some of these categories, it might even make sense to look at them over the course of a year and then divide by 12. So something like small trips, I might say, okay, well, how many small trips do I think I'm going to do over a year? Well, maybe I'm going to do like 2 small weekend, long weekend type trips and then go, okay, well, how much money am I going to spend? I don't know, maybe $1,500. Great. So $1,500 times 2, well, that's $3,000. And if I divide that by 12, well, there's $250. So I'm going to come in here and set a target of $250 monthly, set aside another. Basically, things that do not have a set due date, but can happen irregularly, like clothing or small trips or gifts or, gas, all these things, I'm still going to choose monthly as my cadence. Now, contrast that with something where we know it has a specific date and it's not monthly. So something like visiting family for Thanksgiving. Well, as of right now, let's see, it's March 2025. I'm going to click edit on this target, and you can see that the cadence I've chosen here is going to be yearly because it happens every year at Thanksgiving. I'm going to do $500. Maybe I stay with family and I just need some gas money and then a little bit of extra eating out money. So it's not like I need to get a hotel. And then I'm going to do I'm going to do it by, kind of third week of November. And then I'm going to refill up to every year. And so when I hit save, now YNAB's going to do the math and tell me, hey, you need $55 per month from now until November to be able to save that up. I could do the exact same thing for this big winter cabin trip, right? In this case, I've got a custom, because it's not yearly, it doesn't happen every year, it's just a one-time thing, custom target, $5,500. And I want to do it, fill up to, and I want to do it by January of next year. And so when I hit save, it does the math and says, great, you need to be saving $500 per month to stay on track to your $5,500 by January. And what's super cool is for things like this or Christmas, I'm actually going to need that money before, right? Because I'm going to be booking flights and hotels or Airbnbs or whatever it is. And in this case, YNAB will actually count that spending towards the $5,500. So if I'm saving $500 a month and then I buy my flights in, August, I will have built up some money by then that I can use to spend towards that flight. So I'm still going to set the date based on when the actual trip is happening. Same thing for Christmas spending. A lot of people will make the mistake of setting this to be yearly and they'll set it for like November because they're like, well, I want to have my money early. Don't do that. You want to set this for the actual month that this is going to happen or where some spending could happen because that's when YNAB's going to reset it. If I set this for November, then YNAB thinks that I'm completely done by November. And then when the real year rolls over to December, it resets it for the next year. So if I buy something in December for Christmas, it thinks it's towards next Christmas's spending, which you don't want. So I'm always going to choose to be the actual month, but it will still count any spending towards this. So, Hannah and I, we're kind of psycho in this way, but I mean, we'll pick up Christmas gifts in July if we come across something that we think is perfect for somebody, and I will go ahead and categorize it as Christmas, and it counts towards that year's Christmas spending. Now, this would also be true of something like Amazon Prime, right, where it's a once a year thing. You would want to make sure that you set it for the actual month that payment will process through the bank. Don't set it for a month early. That will mess up your targets. All right, so we've covered monthly targets. We've covered yearly targets. We've covered custom targets. That's going to capture almost everything that you've got going on. Some people will be tempted to choose weekly for things like gas and groceries. I would recommend against that unless you actually only buy those things on a weekly cadence, like you only go to the grocery store every Saturday. I wouldn't do that because whatever you do with a weekly target, you have to choose the day of the week. And then for the months that have 5 of those days, it will want you to budget extra money. Most people don't need extra grocery money just because a month has 5 Wednesdays in it, right? So in this case, I do need it weekly though, because this is piano lessons, and maybe piano lessons do happen every Tuesday, or I have a cleaner that cleans every Thursday, right? So in this case, I'm going to do weekly, $50 for piano lessons, Tuesday, and then set aside another. And now it's going to calculate how many Tuesdays there are in the month, and it will tell me how much I need total for that particular month. There is one more type of target that we have not covered, but I'm actually not going to cover it in this lesson. We're going to do it in a subsequent lesson, and that's going to be targets associated with your credit cards. Credit card targets are a little bit different. They have a payoff balance or a pay specific amount. We're going to cover that when we discuss credit cards in the next lesson. So at this point, you should be able to go through and set targets for pretty much all of your categories. I would encourage you to go ahead and do that now. And if you're confused at all on that, definitely check out the YNAB targets decision tree. Once you've got targets set for all of your stuff, we're ready to move on to step number 8. This is actually the last step that we're going to cover in this lesson. We're going to do steps 9 and 10 in the next one. So this step is to compare your underfunded number to your income. So what does that mean? Let's pop back over here to YNAB. Over on the right-hand side, you're going to notice this auto-assign section. You may need to open that up. And then underneath it, you're going to see a button that says underfunded. That number represents all of your targets that have not yet been funded. And because we haven't started assigning any money yet, we're going to do that in the next lesson, this number is all of your targets. Now, one quick note, depending on your credit cards, again, we're going to talk credit cards in the next lesson, depending on if you got outstanding balances on your credit cards right now, in order to compare this number accurately, what I want you to do is select the checkbox right up here in the top left, and then deselect the credit card payments groups so that you don't have any credit card selected. And then this number will update to not include any credit card balances. In this case, this underfunded number right here, this is all of your targets. And so what I want to do is basically know, all right, well, do I make that much money per month, right? And so this is everything on average, because this is going to not just include all my bills and my normal life spending. This is going to include things like saving up for Christmas, saving up for Thanksgiving, saving up for the big family cabin trip, saving up for the kitchen renovation, saving up for my IRA and 529 contributions, right? And so this is basically saying, hey, man, you need $12,900 per month to operate this budget. The key here in step number 8 is we want to make sure that that number is within our income. And of course, when I say income, I mean the money that hits the bank account on a monthly basis. For some of you that have maybe highly irregular income, or you get like bonuses or quarterly commissions or profit sharing or anything like that, you might want to set this number to be a little bit lower than what you make on average, knowing that then you can catch up when those come in the door. For some of you that are retired and maybe you're taking draws from your portfolio, obviously you're going to work with Adam to figure out what that number is. For others of you who have more of a set payment schedule or payment cycle, the key here is, again, just thinking about what actually hits the bank account, right? So what's your net pay and what is that average on a monthly basis? And we want to make sure that your underfunded number is in the ballpark. If this number is way higher than what I actually make, then I need to go through here with a fine-tooth comb and see if there's anything that I have, way overestimated, and I might want to make some adjustments. But if this number is kind of in the ballpark or under what I'm making, then great. Now, if it's way underneath what I make, I actually might want you to go ahead and increase your targets. Not because I want you to necessarily spend more money, although maybe you can. I want you to make a game plan for all of your income. And so if you're like looking at this going like, well, I mean, we take home like 18 grand a month. It's like, okay, well, why don't we go ahead and beef up some investment contributions? Why don't we go ahead and, get ahead on some of these home maintenance and auto maintenance and other items? Maybe let's increase our target so that we can plan for the future and really have a game plan for all those dollars that are coming in the door. One more thing I want to say on, payment cycles is a lot of people, depending on when they get paid, they think, well, I don't get paid, monthly. And so this monthly budgeting thing just isn't going to work for me. And I would really encourage you to just be patient and let me try to explain that ultimately, if you can start to embrace this, it will help you tremendously regardless of how you get paid. In a future video, we're going to talk about something called next month's money or getting a month ahead. The idea here is going to be that most people tend to use their bank account to make decisions. If you've ever thought, well, can I afford to buy this or can I go do this or that? And you just either have A, done it and then known I'll deal with it later, or B, looked at your checking account to decide if you can do something. Those habits are the ones we're trying to break. Instead, what we're trying to do is set up this group and categories and targets in a way that we will come and look at YNAB to see, okay, well, I want to go have some fun. Let's look at Nick's fun spending category and see if I have any money left for the month. The goal will then be to get you one full month ahead so that you're able to start the month with the entire month taken care of. And then regardless of your payment schedule, you will take that money and put it into next month. The idea is that in March, all of the paychecks you earn, whether it's once a month or once a week or every other week or whatever it is, all of those paychecks you would put into April's budget. And then you show up on April 1st and April is fully funded. And we're going to cover this more in some subsequent lessons, but I'm just trying to plant some seeds in the back of your mind. So if you're having some worry, like, I don't know if this is going to work for me, just hang tight. I've yet to find somebody with a payment schedule that this does not ultimately work for, if we can just make a couple of little mindset tweaks on how we think about our finances. Now, at this point, if you've got all of your targets set up and you've at least done an initial sort of comparison of your underfunded to your income just to make sure that it's roughly in the ballpark, then you have completed this video and through step 8 on our setup checklist, and you're ready to go on to the next lesson. Now, in this lesson, we're going to talk about assigning your money, actually using and understanding the budgeting screen. And then we're also going to talk about setting up your credit cards in YNAB. So thanks so much for watching this one. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.